Russia sent shockwaves around the world yesterday, when it announced it was immediately suspending participation in the UN-brokered Black Sea Grain Initiative. This deal, which unlocked agricultural exports from Ukraine, was heralded as a major diplomatic achievement. But Russia's withdrawal has imperiled the entire agreement and cast the geopolitical implications into uncertainty. In this video, we'll analyze the historical context around this deal, Russia's potential motivations, the global impact its exit could have, and what it might mean for the next phase of the war in Ukraine. In a year when it was in effect, the Black Sea Grain Initiative resulted in nearly 33 million metric tons of corn, wheat and other grains exports by Ukraine under the arrangement. The last ship left Ukraine under the deal on Sunday. To put that volume into perspective, that's nearly a quarter of Ukraine's entire annual grain exports. The numbers show just how crucial this deal was for unleashing Ukraine's stranded food stocks onto global markets. Russia's move to suspend participation threatens to derail that progress. The Black Sea Grain Initiative was formally signed in July 2022 between Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the UN. It established a corridor through the Black Sea to allow ships to travel safely to 3 designated Ukrainian ports. This ended Russia's months-long blockade of Ukraine's coastline that trapped millions of tons of grain inside Ukraine's borders. Remember, Russia and Ukraine together supply nearly 30% of the world's exported wheat and barley. Global food prices spiked after Russia invaded in February 2022. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called the deal a beacon of hope in efforts to ease the global food crisis. The goal was to facilitate exports from Ukraine while also clearing obstacles for Russian food and fertilizer shipments. But tensions brewed under the surface as the warring sides traded accusations throughout the deal's duration. Russia claimed Ukraine was abusing the deal's safe passageways to transit weapons and conduct attacks. Ukraine alleged Russia was hindering implementation of the agreement. Last Saturday, Russia officially announced it was suspending participation in the Black Sea grain deal. It cited 2 justifications. First, it accused Ukraine of using the grain corridor to execute drone attacks on Russian Navy ships and infrastructure around the port of Sevastopol. Russia also complained that under the deal not enough grain has reached poor countries. Second, Russia claimed commitments to facilitate its own food and fertilizer exports under the deal were not being fulfilled due to Western sanctions. Russia's main demands were the resumption of its ammonia exports through a pipeline to the Ukrainian port of Odessa, and the reconnection of its state agricultural bank Roskosbank to the SWIFT international payment system. It was cut off by the European Union in June last year after the invasion. The Russian Defense Ministry stated, "All responsibility for the disruption of food deliveries lies with the Kyiv regime and its Western patrons." Stepping back, Russia is likely weaponizing the grain deal's suspension as blackmail to accomplish several geopolitical objectives. By withdrawing, Russia gains negotiating power to push for concessions from Ukraine. Resuming grain exports could become a bargaining chip. As UN Secretary Guterres said, the deal is too important to fail. Russia wants to add pressure on Ukraine's economy as agricultural exports are a key revenue source funding Ukraine's defense. Limiting trade routes weakens Ukraine financially. Reduced grain supply will punish poorer regions like Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia that depend on Ukraine's exports. This builds pressure on Europe and the US. Russia wants to highlight the failure of Western leaders who lauded the grain deal as a diplomatic victory. Suspension defies those who claimed sanctions wouldn't hinder food exports. Putin can frame pulling out of the deal as rejecting international demands and boldly standing up to Ukraine and the West. Now let's examine the wider geopolitical implications of Russia exiting the Black Sea grain deal. Ukraine is the world's 4th largest grain exporter. According to the UN World Food Programme, 47 countries import over 30% of their wheat from Ukraine and Russia. Disrupting this supply risks famine and instability. Grain prices skyrocketed globally after Russia's invasion. Ukraine's restricted exports will further drive commodity prices and inflation higher, especially in developing economies. Russia's unilateral withdrawal damages the credibility of the UN and Turkey as negotiators. It may limit their ability to reach future agreements and enforce the international rules-based order. The UN warned ending the deal could cause protests, violence, and mass migration in developing regions dependent on Ukrainian food imports like North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Restricting Ukraine's agricultural exports lengthens the war by forcing Ukraine to become more reliant on Western military aid. It removes incentives for Russia to pursue a peace deal. What's next? Looking ahead, it's unclear if Russia's withdrawal is permanent. Much depends on whether negotiations at the UN and security guarantees from Turkey can convince Russia to resume participation. But for now, the deal hangs in limbo as Ukrainian grain remains locked in ports. Ending exports risks plunging vulnerable regions like Africa and the Middle East into severe hunger and turmoil. Millions of lives may hinge on whether diplomacy and compromise can salvage the Black Sea grain deal. This pivotal agreement has now become the latest flashpoint in the war's complex geopolitical consequences. Russia's potential motivations for suspending it, its far-reaching global impacts, and what it signals about prospects for de-escalation and peace. Please like and subscribe to support this channel if you gained value from this analysis.